Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Rob Thacker. I'm the music director here. We're going to sing a gathering hymn of Come, Come, Whoever You Are. We'll sing it through once in unison, and today, maybe the time change has an effect on the total number of people in the seats. So we're going to just do it in a round, but in two. So it'll be one, and then two, and I'll lead you when you should come in. Okay, here we go. Once, all together in unison. Please rise and body your spirit. Welcome.
Welcome. I invite you to rise, embody your spirit, and join me in reciting our chalice lighting. Here today, in this place, and with these people, may we listen so that we can hear. May we hear so that we can feel. May we feel so that we can know, and may we know so that we can change ourselves in this world.
Chalice we light our way.
Good morning. We're delighted you're here today, both online and in person. We extend a special welcome to those who are newcomers, whether to St. John's or Unitarian Universalism. At St. John's, our mission is to create a safe and caring community, working for peace and social justice, and celebrating beliefs that respect freedom of thought. We celebrate diversity, and we welcome folks of all ages, all identities, abilities, and histories to join in creating our beloved community. My name is Reverend Jennifer Grayson, and I'm the interim minister here at St. John's today. Today, we welcome, separate sentence. Today, we welcome a special guest speaker, Reverend Dr. Teresa Cooley, who will be speaking with us about the blessings of congregational conflict. I know, putting those two together, I'm intrigued too. Each month here at St. John's, we explore one theme and how it applies to our lives and our journey. This month, we're exploring transformation. Come, let us worship together.
Please rise and body your spirit, and we'll sing hymn 359, When We Are Gathered.
Please join me in reciting our affirmation, which you can see on your screen. This is the mission of our faith, to teach the fragile art of hospitality, to revere both the critical mind and the generous heart, to prove that diversity need not mean divisiveness, and to witness to all that we must hold the whole world in our hands. Each week, we make time in our service to ground ourselves in what we value, to celebrate and honor our community. Here at St. John's, one of the ways we do that is by honoring our joys and concerns, by coming forward to place stones representing all that we carry into the sand representing the many and unique parts of our beloved community over all the generations. If you would like a joy or concern to be read, please leave them on the table or enter them in chat. We honor and recognize all of the stones that have been placed today, and we have a couple of spoken joys, it looks like. Today we celebrate the birthdays of two of our grandchildren, What a Joy They Bring, by Mary and Tom Darner. Congratulations. And today is the start of Ramadan. I want to invite you into the spirit of prayer or meditation. Rumi says, "Come, come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshiper, lover of leaving. It doesn't matter. Ours is not a caravan of despair. Come, even if you have broken your vows 1,000 times. Come, yet again come." You recognize the words from our song this morning. As we honor the joys and concerns shared in silence and out loud, may we remember that we are all connected to one another, that what impacts one of us impacts all of us, that above all we are a community of people connected in love and justice, and when we share our joy, it is joy multiplied. When we share our concern, it is burden lightened. May we be invited to recognize the interdependence of all. I want to invite the children and families and anyone who just feels like coming forward to do so for our story for all ages. It's called God's Hat. It's by Christopher Boothie. Pronounce his name. So as you might guess, I'm going to need your all help to do this today. I know, I never do that. So one day in a village, everybody was having a great time, and all of a sudden, God came walking down the center of the village, dressed in these long flowing robes. What color do you think they might have been? What's a great color for robes? I hear some purple. Any other ideas? Like, can be multiple colors. Blue, some pink, brown. Anybody else? What? Green. Green's an excellent color. And so she had these long flowing robes of purple and blue and pink and brown and green. And they were just beautiful. And on top of her head, she was wearing a hat. And when she got through town, everybody started to talk about it. Oh my gosh, God visited us, and did you see the beautiful robes with the brown and the green and the pink and the purple and the blue? And some people said, oh, and the lovely blue hat. And somebody else said, wait a minute, that hat wasn't blue, it was red. And some people were saying, no, the hat was blue. You guys are blue hat, okay? You guys approximately wherever a red hat. Got it? And so they started arguing with each other, with some people saying blue and some people saying red. And the fights continued. They kept fighting over this. Now, exactly. Personally, I think this is kind of a silly thing to fight about, but, people. And so eventually the fights got so big that they built a wall right down the center of the road. And the people on one side said, and the people on the other side said, and the people fought for years over the color of this hat. And they would argue, and then they stopped talking altogether until one day God came back. And she was wearing luxurious robes of brown and pink and green and purple and blue and no hat. And she walked along the top of the wall. And people cheered that she was back, even the blue and the... But somebody said, God, you have to help us. You have to solve this argument for us. Many years ago, you came through town and you were wearing a hat. What color was it? And so I heard one of the blue people, blue. I like your commitment to a role. And so she thought about it, and she said, well, I do remember that. I believe that day I was wearing my hat that is blue on one side and red on the other. And then a child started laughing. Can you guys laugh? That's great. And then everybody else started laughing. And then they took down that wall. The end. Please join me in seeing the children out to their class with the children's blessing. Invite Emily up for our pledge moment.
Hi, my name's Emily Hodges, and I know most of you. And I'm wondering, did any of you get one of these recently? If you haven't, it's a pledge envelope, and this is pledge season, where we are looking to raise $299,000 in pledges for the coming fiscal year, in addition to our capital campaign pledge that's going on. If you didn't get one, Charles and Joetta and Winnie, can you stand up so people can see who you are? Let's look around. These are the 3 pledge team captains. If you didn't get one of these, or if you got it and lost it, please see them at the table outside. You can also look in today's program. Right here in the middle is the web link where you could go and pledge online, which we really encourage. Then there's one other thing you can find online, which I always appreciate. It's called the Suggested Fair Share Contribution Guide. And it's got 4 different levels: supporter, sustainer, visionary, transformer. And it has suggestions based on your monthly income of what would be ideal for you to pledge. We know that people's financial circumstances are different, and this helps give you an idea of how much of that $299,000 you can pledge for the coming fiscal year. One way, I'm fortunate enough that I don't have to depend on the income from my IRA, so I donate it directly to the church. It doesn't come to me, it goes directly to the church, and I get a big tax deduction that way. If you're interested in that, talk to me or Chris Wagner, our treasurer. Another thing, because of the capital campaign and the pledge, I've cut back considerably. I've cut out a lot of my charitable contributions, and I've cut back on others, and I've cut down, unfortunately, on my political contributions as well. I came to St. John's for choir about 40 plus years ago, and I've stayed all these years still singing in choir because I love the church, the people I've met here. I have lifelong friends. A lot of them have passed on, but they're still deep in my heart. And the program in Transylvania, I've been to Transylvania 4 times, to the town of Nyarad, St. Laszlo. And the wonderful ministers and staff here, they have to be paid. So please consider deeply how much you can give and fill out the form that's in here. Read the letter. And where's the form? The form is on the table. Also, if you have, thank you if you've made your pledge already. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Because I'm one of the people who calls afterwards, and I call it the mop-up period. We want to get all the pledges in by April 24th, because we have to have them in order to do the budget, which we vote on early in June. If you haven't filled out your pledge form yet, please stop by the table and get one of these stickers to take home and put it right on your computer screen if you have a computer screen. That's a reminder to fill out your pledge form this week, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. Our offering words today are by Alice Naisman. Let us take a moment to honor the ancestors of this church, the people who first came together to create a home for liberal religion here in Cincinnati, who worked to raise money for a building, who sat in committee meetings and created bylaws, who chopped and marinated and created and baked for potlucks, and we have one coming up, who painted and weeded and pounded nails and washed dishes, who gathered to worship, to learn, to grieve, to heal, to serve, to build justice, to transform their lives and this world. We are the recipients of an incredible gift and a beautiful vision. Let us do our part to keep this congregation strong, vital, and thriving for generations to come. As we work to support and empower our mission, St. John's is committed to creating a safe and caring community, working for peace and social justice, and celebrating beliefs that respect freedom of thought. This morning's offering will now be gratefully received.
It's lovely to be with you all. Our reading this morning is from the poet Danna Faulds. There is no controlling life. Try corralling a lightning bolt, containing a tornado. Dam a stream and it will create a new channel. Resist and the tide will sweep you off your feet. Allow and grace will carry you to higher ground. The only safety lies in letting it all in, the wild and the weak, fear, fantasies, failure, and success. When loss rips off the doors of your heart or sadness veils your vision with despair, practice becomes simply bearing the truth in the choice to let go of your known way of being. The whole world is revealed to your new eyes. Please join me in hymn number 1029. Love knocks and waits for us to hear. I am very happy to be with you today, and I bring you greetings, from your sibling Ohio congregation in Columbus. Showing up for a service about conflict is an act of faith itself. And I appreciate your being here and considering some possible new ways of thinking about conflict. If I'm even only a little successful, maybe you'll stay for the workshop after the service. I have, for better or for worse, become known as one of the experts in matters of congregational conflicts, an expertise that has come at a great cost at times, as I've had to witness the tragic conflagrations that have severed friendships of decades and made devoted congregational members determined never to set foot in the door again. And I would also say I have witnessed congregational conflicts that have stood out for me as the greatest examples of spiritual growth. Let me start with a story of the first kind, a buried conflict which turned toxic. I was just beginning my time as the district executive serving the 56 congregations in the Boston area, and I received a call from a minister who was completely panicked. He said that his choir director had suddenly turned against him and was organizing not just the choir, but other people in the church against him. And he told me that these people were greeting people at the door, newcomers, by saying, "Welcome to our church. We hate our minister." True story. Being new to that job, I thought I was supposed to come in and interview everyone, bring them all to the table with my recommendations and observations, and then, of course, we could proceed in a reasonable way toward a solution, right? As you might imagine, that did not happen. Even before I was 10 minutes into my report, people started protesting loudly, and other people responded just as loudly, just like blue and red. And I felt lucky to get away with my limbs intact. Given all that I now know, and should have probably known then, about conflict, I should have recognized that people who are in an angry, anxious, and defensive state would never be able to take in anything reasonable because their brains were shut down. There was no way this kind of gathering could turn into anything other than a painful and damaging mess. A more recent example, last spring I came out to Ohio. I was in California at the time to lead the ministers' chapter in a workshop on conflict. It began in a rather typical fashion. Everyone went around the circle and gave their check-in. And within 30 minutes, I knew that my colleagues were in dire need of finding tools to work with conflict. Fully 2/3 of them were experiencing difficult conflicts in the churches that they serve, and they were at their wits' end. Many of the conflicts were about people in their churches reacting to the proposed revisions to Article 2, our UU Statement of Purpose. Maybe you're familiar with that conversation. Article 2 is a new way of thinking about our purpose that revolves around certain core values, love being at the center. One minister said that a congregant came to him absolutely furious. The UUA was just trying to force us to do things we don't want to do, and we won't stand for it, he proclaimed. My colleague innocently asked, where do you see that in the report? And he said, it's right here. It's right here where it says we. We didn't ask for anything like this. And what about having love at the center of the circle? What has love got to do with religion anyway? In both of these instances, these conflicts arose out of real and painful differences. But neither of them could possibly be fixed by determining who was right or by making reasonable assertions. What was happening was that these differences were so threatening, they were activating the part of our brain that responds when it feels under threat, the amygdala. And I'll say more about this in a moment. I know that sometimes people can be bewildered that conflicts in churches happen at all. Aren't they supposed to be places of peace and harmony, right? Most people who think this don't understand congregational life, by the way. Conflicts happen because we're different from one another. That should be obvious, and most of the time it isn't a big problem. But the difficulty arises when we feel misunderstood or judged in our differences, and when we can't see a way to reconcile them. Conflicts such as these are never about facts. These kind of conflicts are about values. We come to church to explore our deepest values. What do we care about? How can we make meaning of loss and grief? What can we do to bring about change in the world? These aren't factual questions, they're values questions. And engaging with them actually makes us pretty vulnerable to one another. When someone questions our values, it can almost feel like an attack on our person because values are at the heart of who we are. Our values are formed by our different personalities and what they make us predisposed to, by how we were raised and taught what was most important to do, the cultures of our families and neighborhoods and professions that subtly form us. But rarely do we actually surface or question them. They're implicit in how we live and how we interpret the world. And without really being conscious of it, we make the assumption that everyone sees the world the same way we do. The Reverend Dr. Jackie Lewis, minister of Middle Collegiate Church in New York, said, "We are all wired by what we've experienced to be in search of a story with an ending that feels like it has a completion. And the stories that we gravitate to are the ones that make sense to us, stories that fit, stories that feel like they have continuity, connection to the past, where we've been. Those stories that we will follow are the ones that feel true, feel like they have continuity to our past and resonate with the trajectory of our lives. So we're looking for the story that doesn't change our minds, We're actually looking for the story that confirms what is already in our minds. So we pay attention to the stories around us that fit our own narrative of meaning. And we find ourselves bewildered when other people have a different story that makes sense to them. We constantly make assumptions about what surrounds us without even being aware that we're doing so. And those assumptions are necessarily different from others. Or, as George Saunders said, I think, therefore I am wrong. After which I speak, and my wrongness falls on someone who is also thinking wrongly, and then there are two of us thinking wrongly, and being human, we can't bear to think without taking action, which, having been taken, makes things worse. When we're suddenly confronted with the fact that we others don't see the world the same way we do, it can sometimes cause a kind of panic that makes us confused, defensive, angry. So what was happening in those conversations about Article 2 that I mentioned before was that each person in that conversation traveled up a different ladder of assumptions to conclusions that were radically different from one another. It was like they weren't even speaking the same language. And offering rational observations was like gasoline on the fire. Because in situations of high conflict, our brains literally shut down. I'll take a bit of a dive into my favorite subject of brain science for a moment. Many of you may already know this, but when people feel physically or even emotionally threatened, what gets stimulated in our brain is the brainstem, the amygdala. It's the part of our brain that we share with every other living thing, so it's often called the lizard brain. The amygdala sees a threat, and it has three basic responses: fight, flight, or freeze. And its purpose is to help you make quick decisions in a crisis, so it only offers you a few choices. If you're confronted with an angry snake as you take a walk in the woods, you don't want to take the time to analyze, what kind of snake is that? How beautiful are those markings? What in the environment might cause the snake to start acting so agitated? That you have to make a quick decision in times of crisis. And because of that, the amygdala actually has the power to shut down the rest of your brain. So if you're expecting rationality from someone in this state, it simply isn't physically possible. Now, let me be clear, sometimes having the amygdala screaming at you is the right and rational thing, whether it's because we encounter a snake or because people are doing or saying sexist or racist things. Our self-protective mechanisms serve an important purpose. That being said, being in this state does not allow for mutual learning. If we manage to calm that amygdala down, then other parts of the brain can begin to get engaged, particularly those that allow us to feel complex emotions. These parts of the brain are what we have in common with all other mammals, and they help us to bond with one another, to create connections, to develop empathy, to feel, rather than just react or think. When we can feel connected with one another, then we're more able to tolerate our differences. Interestingly, some of the very behaviors that help soothe our amygdalas are things that we do in church: listening to music, engaging in rhythm, having quiet time for reflection. All of these are actually strategies for helping us recover from traumatic experiences. And then there's the neocortex, the part of the brain that allows us to think complex thoughts, to consider many possible ideas, to hold conflicting notions without feeling like we have to resolve them. This allows us to feel curiosity, to be open to new learning. But that part of the brain simply can't be accessed if we feel threatened or fearful of losing our connection. So what if, instead of being protective or defensive, we were able to soothe ourselves enough into the position of asking the person, how did you come to that conclusion? And not in a, why in the world would you think that way? But a true, honest curiosity. What if radical ideas, we started questioning our own conclusions, our own positions? What if we came into a disagreement with the belief that disagreements exist because we have something that we need to learn? This is the heart of the theory of conflict transformation. Conflict transformation is about trying to let go of our assumptions to get to a place where we can imagine something different together. It's about recognizing that conflict will always be present, but we can find dynamic and adaptive ways to respond to it rather than dysfunctional ways of reacting to it. I learned about this theory and approach when I was doing my doctoral work at Hartford Seminary, but it took me several more years beyond that before I started to finally apply it. That wonderful meeting with the congregation that hated their minister, I began to remember this work after that disastrous meeting, and instead of going in to try to fix the conflict, I began to teach them the skills that they needed to work with the conflicts that always exist. And gradually there were fewer and fewer congregational explosions and more congregations that still had conflicts, but they weren't destructive and dire. I remember working with another board who had the terrible duty to inform the congregation that their beloved minister emeritus had committed sexual misconduct. This board was terrified to face the congregation, but they did it in a way that used the many tools of healthy engagement. And afterward, one board member said, "I feel more spiritually connected to this church than I ever have before, because of the wonderful ways we have been able to show up for one another, even in our anger and grief." That congregation that used to hate their minister, the minister did leave. They spent several years working on their relationships with one another, and then they called a new minister who was almost universally loved and who is still there 20 years later. Things do get better. I wish all of this work in this arena has helped me to behave perfectly all the time. Alas, that is not the case. But I have to say, the moments of my greatest growth have happened when I have set my convictions and positions aside and opened myself to truly listening and learning from others. I've had to learn the hard way that the point is not to be right all the time. The point is how to be effective and connected in building relationships and solutions together. It's not always possible to approach conflict with hope and expectation. In fact, it often isn't the case, especially now when our partisan anxieties are completely ablaze. It's hard for me to imagine really being in a learning space with someone on the opposite side. But when I start to despair about that, I try to wind myself back down to the place that I live now, the communities that I work with, like here. If we can start to learn a different way of being, starting with ourselves, when we allow ourselves to let this community into our hearts, to open ourselves to new possibilities, to relax our convictions and open our minds to one another, we are on our way to building what can truly be called a faith community. And then we can be on our way to building a new world. May it be so. Amen. The next hymn is.
Thank you. That was amazing. I have a couple of announcements. The Transforming Conflict workshop is today after the service. Stick around if you can. We have food, and Reverend Dr. Cooley will be leading it. Let's see. And submit your nominations for renaming the Jefferson Room. In Kroll Pfeiffer, you'll see a table with a box. Today or next Sunday, you can also submit nominations by email to Debbie Combs. The auction date is set. Mark your calendars for Saturday, May 11th from 5 to 8 p.m. And we have a newcomer potluck this coming Friday, the 15th, from 5 to 7 p.m. And everyone is invited. You don't have to be a newcomer. Bring food if you can, and if you don't, come anyway. Oh, yeah. And I'm not used to being worship associate. Rob will lead us in our final hymn, number 128, For All That Is Our Life.
Please rise in body or spirit.
Please be seated. Our benediction comes from my colleague Alicia Ford. When we pause to remember who we are, companions on this grand experiment called life, when we take a moment to shed the ways we have been carefully taught, to lead from fear, to believe that we are separate, when we take a moment to shed all of that and hear our stories, when we take a moment to embrace, to practice a different way of being, then we are living into the promise of building the world we dream about, seeking to be transformed even as we transform, becoming explorers and learners in this world around us, humbled by what we do not yet know, fulfilling the promise of healing a fragmented world, laboring not just in hope, but in love. In the Spirit we commit, in this Spirit we pray. Amen.